You have reached the Geek Elite. Good luck.
I know what you're thinking. Did he fire 6 shots or only 5? Well, to tell you the truth, in all this excitement, I've kind of lost track myself. But being this is a 44 Magnum, the most powerful handgun in the world, and would blow your head clean off, you've got to ask yourself one question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
On tonight's episode of the Mitch and Rich Show, we are going to continue our discussion of Oscar-nominated films for the year 2021, or I guess technically they're for the year 2020. The award ceremonies in 2021. But we're going to talk about Minari. Richard, how did you feel about Minari coming out without getting too deep into it?
I liked it. I guess it's not exactly what I was anticipating, but weirdly, that kind of seems to be a common trend for me with the last 3 movies. I'm not really sure why that is, but yeah, it was a little different, but I enjoyed it overall. What about you?
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it overall. I definitely, I enjoyed it, and we'll get more into that after we talk about some movie adjacent news, because there's stuff happening, and we like to talk about it. So, first thing I wanted to talk about was Mads Mikkelsen has been added to the cast of Indiana Jones 5. Last week we talked about Phoebe Waller-Bridge being added to the sequel. How do you feel about Mads Mikkelsen? Like, he definitely shows up in a lot of things that we like.
Yeah, no, I think he is absolutely phenomenal. Did they because I know with was it Phoebe Waller, we talked about that I think last show, and they didn't really announce that she had joined the cast, but they didn't announce the part. So did they announce what part he is going to be playing in the movie?
No, I don't believe so. I don't see it here anywhere. I think they just like to keep those kind of things secret until it shows up. Like, I don't know. I would assume that he would be some kind of compatriot to Indiana Jones, or maybe even a protagonist.
Yeah, either way, I'm totally on board. Like I said, I really enjoy watching his performances and his characterizations and things like that. So I'm actually pretty stoked about that. I think that's a great choice. He can play a good protagonist. He can play a good villain or antagonist, if you will. So I haven't seen him do anything that I didn't like. So I'm totally stoked for this. This is already sounds like it's shaping up to be a pretty interesting Indiana Jones project. So I'm getting more and more, reservedly getting more and more excited. I'm trying to keep the hype under control because I don't want to get disappointed too much, but it's starting to sound like a pretty good excursion for the film, I hope.
Did I say protagonist earlier? I meant to say antagonist. You did. I know That's know okay. What I meant. I just don't want other people to think I'm a dum-dum.
Well, but I mean, I think the situation is that based on what they did with the last one, I mean, there was kind of 2 protagonists in the last Crystal Skull film. So, I mean, I could see it trying to go that same way. And if they're trying to find a character to do some spin-off movies and things like that, like I could kind of see them having like this, archaeologist rivalry between the 2 of them, and competing for the same thing, but both not be bad guys per se. You know what I mean? So if they did a spinoff thing with Mads, I'd be on board for that too.
Oh, that's a good call. I didn't even think about that. Sure. Yeah. Give me the Mads Mikkelsen spinoff archaeologist show. However that ends up being. I guess I am stoked for it, for this movie, to see what it is that comes out of it, whether or not this is the end of the Indiana Jones saga, at least with Harrison Ford, or not, where they go forward with this, or sideways if they do spinoffs. So there you go. Interesting decisions made by top men. Netflix is making a live-action Gundam movie from Jordan Vogt-Roberts. Now, we didn't talk about Godzilla versus Kong on this podcast, But I mean, going back to Pacific Rim, I feel like we're definitely in the realm of giant robots fighting kaijus kind of era. Maybe it's even Transformers. I guess I'm not really all that familiar with the Mobile Wing Gundam like property IP. So how do you feel, and I don't know if you are, but how do you feel about a live action Gundam movie being made at Netflix?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you. Like, I really am not, I'm not really super familiar with the Gundam animes or mangas or any of that sort of stuff. I guess what I do kind of, I think, have the understanding of, and I could be wrong in this, but I think you kind of spoke to it. I think it does seem a little bit like Pacific Rim, right? Like, it's supposed to be people getting in these mechs and fighting, kaiju monsters and things like that. So I'm always down for that. Like, I always, I'll at least watch it to give it a shot, right? It's the same thing with all the monster movies and things like that come out. Obviously, some of the Pacific Rim movies were better than the other ones, of course. But, I mean, I'm totally always excited to watch them. I think there's usually at least a few interesting action sequences in those types of properties and things like that. So I'm definitely on board to see what they do with it, especially the choice of taking something that's animated into live action and a property that traditionally has a pretty big fan base to it, from what I understand. So they are going to have to do, they're going to have to do some due diligence to kind of appease those fans. But I'm very curious to see what they're going to do with it. Yeah, no, I think I'm in for watching it too. I think I'm definitely interested. Jordan Vogt-Roberts also directed Kong Skull Island, and of the recent Kong Godzilla movies, that was probably my favorite. I enjoyed Kong Skull Island a lot. Other works of his, The Kings of Summer, a bunch of episodes of You're the Worst. Apparently, he's also announced for doing the Metal Gear Solid movie. Let's see, Single Dads was a TV show. A bunch of episodes of Funny or Died Presents. Nick Offerman, American Ham. I'm guessing that's some kind of documentary. How do you feel about Jordan Vogt-Roberts? Yeah, I mean, I don't recall being as big of a fan of Kong Skull Island as you are, but I mean, I also don't think it was like terrible. You know what I mean? Like, I don't remember talking that badly about that movie. I don't recall like loving it, but again, it's Metal Gear Solid, so I'm in instantly because I do really love Hideo Kojima and I really do love that kind of franchise. I guess it's a little interesting to me though, because like Hideo Kojima has wanted to be a film director like his entire life, even before he became, a game developer. And so obviously there's probably still some bad blood between him and Konami, with all the stuff that went on there. So I'm sure that they're probably not chomping at the bit to let him direct. And I guess in some capacities, he also doesn't have any real established history as a film director, but it would have been really cool to see like a Metal Gear Solid movie directed by Hideo Kojima. But that being said, I mean, I kind of understand why it's also not happening that way. And I'm definitely on board to watch the movie. I guess I haven't seen a ton of, the director's work. Cause I mean, I think Kong Skull Island was kind of the bigger one out of all of them that I've watched, but that's not a bad thing. I mean, hopefully he does a great job, and that's going to be a very hard intellectual property to get right because there's a lot of really interesting, crazy things that are done in the games that are maybe a little bit more challenging to transition into a live action film. And it's one of those kind of beloved game franchises. So again, it's going to be difficult to kind of appease everyone. But I applaud him for taking on the challenge and giving it a go.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be. I think that it's an interesting choice for him to direct it. The writer of the movie is a name that I'm very familiar with, Brian K. Vaughan. Now for TV wise, he's written. He wrote for Lost He has a series for Why the Last Man, a comic book that he created coming out. He created Runaways, and they have TV episodes of that. Paper Girls is on its way out, and that was also a comic book property. But as for comic books, like I said, Why the Last Man, he's written Swamp Thing, Superman, Green Lantern, Batman, all the big ones. I think the X-Men, the one that most people know him for as of right now is Saga. And if you haven't read Saga, like, you're missing out. It's a great book over at Image. I know people have talked about making that into a live action thing, and most other people talk about, like, there's no possible way you can make that into a live action thing. Like, it just wouldn't look right. And I think that is something that can't quite be adapted right. So I can't wait to see what Brian K. Vaughan has to do with the property.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree. I think I haven't finished, Saga, and I'm not super up to date on it, but I did start reading it, and I agree. It's a really fantastic book. Why the Last Man Standing? Again, it's been a good while since I've read that, but I remember it being a very interesting concept at the time, and also, again, a very good read. So yeah, I think that's pretty exciting. I'd be very curious to see how that kind of pans out from the writing aspect as well.
Okay. Netflix, I don't know. They don't have a release date for that yet, so obviously they haven't started production. However, Netflix has scored a deal with Sony Pictures. So Sony has inked a multi-year exclusive first pay window licensing deal in the US that will allow Netflix first pay window rights to Sony Pictures titles following their theatrical and home entertainment windows. So as I understand that, it means that the movies that will be coming out next year, like Morbius and Uncharted, will, after their theatrical run and their video on demand or premium video on demand runs, they will be exclusive to Netflix. So you won't see them on like HBO or Amazon Prime for not being paid for, kind of thing. I mean, this is an interesting deal. How do you feel about this for the movie industry?
Well, okay, I probably should know this, but I don't off the top of my head. Sony doesn't have their own streaming platform, right? Like, they don't have their own streaming service.
That is correct. Unlike Disney, NBC Universal, and Viacom CBS, Sony notably has not launched a direct-to-consumer streaming service to compete with Netflix yet. Disney has all their Disney movies going straight to Disney Plus. NBC Universal now has Peacock, and Viacom has Paramount Plus. So, and then of course Warner Brothers has HBO Plus, or HBO Max. Sorry.
Yeah, so I mean, I think from that perspective, I like this approach more, because this is, I like them kind of having the option to go to these other streaming platforms instead of just being like, well, we're going to fabricate our own, because that's one less thing I have to subscribe to, which I think is smart. I genuinely don't think every individual like studio or, production company or whatever, needs to have their own streaming platform. Like, I think we've kind of already reached a pretty good, spectrum of streaming platforms. Like, I feel like we could just call it a day, and not continue to just be like, oh, we gotta have our own too. Like, it's getting so crazy. So from that standpoint, I think that's a really good deal. And, it gets tricky too for, I guess, Sony to kind of navigate all of that, because in some capacities they are competing against these other studios and things like that. So, in some ways they are still kind of competing against Netflix, because Netflix, of course, is producing their own content. But in other ways, it's not the same. I would speculate as to how they're competing against maybe like Warner Brothers or Paramount or whatever, So I guess from that standpoint, Netflix does kind of seem to be a much more viable option. And, again, Sony makes a lot of electronics, and so does Apple. So again, it's kind of like, it doesn't seem to make as much sense for them to try to go to Apple. I mean, I guess maybe Amazon, could have been a choice there as well. And maybe it was. Maybe there was some, behind the scenes conversations and negotiations that were happening, and Netflix just came out on top. But, and again, Netflix is also the kind of the dominant market share still as well. I mean, they still have the largest viewership. HBO Max is still, from what I understand of it, on the bottom of that in a pretty substantial number. So, I think it makes the most amount of sense for them to try to go to Netflix. And again, not having to pay to do another subscription platform to another streaming service. Like, I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah, I think you see that Netflix definitely starts it off when they decided they wanted to do, or not when they decided, when they realized that TV series was a big thing. It wasn't just about movies anymore, right? Like, Netflix started off with sending you the DVDs for movies, and then they were like sending the DVDs for TV series, basically anything that was on DVD. Then we got the streaming aspect of it, and I think everybody found out that, yeah, I just want to kind of stream these TV series that I like to watch over and over. Then they started making their original TV series, and that's when I feel like streaming really took a turn. Even though HBO had already been doing, original programming for a long time, now they have HBO Max. They have more shows that are available only on HBO Max. Amazon started doing more TV series. I mean, obviously they did it before HBO Max, but they started doing original TV series after Netflix, and then Hulu, and all. I feel like the golden age of TV that we're talking about, or even as you coined it, the platinum age now, has really changed it so that each one of these studios wants their own streaming platform. Because, like, if it was just movies still, I think, yes, Universal Movies would be happy to just keep going to Netflix or Amazon Prime. Same with Warner Brothers. But now, when you have this opportunity for people to come back every week to watch something, like a series that is ongoing, they needed to backfill their logs also, or their catalog, I should say, with movies, so that they keep people there after the series are done for whatever season. And thus we have all these. Now, that's not to say Sony also has Sony Television, so I don't know if they're making original programming for Sony Television or not, but they definitely have their original movies. But it must have been just more financially viable for them to sell the rights to Netflix instead of coming up with their own streaming platform.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to assume that it would be at some point, you know what I mean? And again, I think it's also daunting to be like, well, we're going to try to start another whole platform and, have all of the server space behind it, try to drive all these viewership and traffic to it. And so, I mean, I think it does become a pretty big undertaking when you're, committing to something like that. So yeah, I could see it being a lot more finance. And again, do you have enough exclusive content to do it? Do you already have a lot of that content licensed out to other places? Like, I feel like there's a whole list of other, issues to kind of have to take on and tackle, and logistics to kind of make that stuff work in a way that would be beneficial to them, versus just being like, okay, well, we can offload this stuff for a pretty good price to, someone else. Also,
you look at Disney Plus. Disney Plus has all the Star Wars and Marvel stuff, right? They get to make all those TV series based off of that stuff. Paramount Plus now has all Star Trek, and they're making all the TV shows based off of Star Trek. Warner Brothers has DC, if that's what you want to care about, but they also have, I don't know, do they have Harry? Yeah, they have Harry Potter. They have other stuff that they can make TV series based off of. But Sony, I mean, I guess they have Spider-Man, and the plans seem to be making a whole bunch of different movies based off of Spider-Man, but I don't hear anything about TV series based off of Spider-Man. So maybe that's just what it was. Is just it was more viable to do it this way.
I would also have to speculate to a certain extent that they probably don't have the rights to do a Spider-Man television show. I have a feeling they probably actually only have the rights for film.
That could be interesting. That could be something, because I know like Disney does their animated TV series, and they do get to have Spider-Man and all those characters. So maybe you're right.
I don't know for sure, but that would just be my best guess.
Now, jumping over to Amazon Prime and Prime Video, or even Amazon Studios, whatever you want to call them at this point, they too also own a huge franchise IP, and they are making a TV series based off of it. I believe it was last year when it was announced that they paid, or it's last year or 2 years ago, they paid $250 million to secure the rights to make Lord of the Rings TV series. Well, apparently it's being reported that they have invested on top of that $465 million for just the first season. I feel like, I mean, I get it. Lord of the Rings has been around for a century. Like, people love that franchise, love that IP. Those first three movies did all the money. I don't know about the second set of Hobbit movies, like the 3 Hobbit movies, if they did all the money or not. But are you a big Lord of the Rings fan? Are you going to watch this series?
I mean, yeah, I'll probably watch it. I've definitely seen the movies a number of times. I like the movies. Being, kind of wicked dyslexic, I have not sat down and read the 80,000 page novels that exist. I guess I should maybe try to go back and do like audiobooks of them or something if I have time. But I really enjoy the movies. I haven't watched the Hobbit ones. Again, I heard they were not that great, and I think a lot of people were upset that they took a single book and then tried to stretch it into 3 films, and that capacity just didn't work, I guess. Or that's kind of what I had heard. So I haven't seen that, but I mean, yeah, the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings, original trilogy that he did, I really enjoyed those. I could see it, again, some people might not be aware of this, but I remember reading or hearing that HBO spent like $10 million on just one scene of Game of Thrones. So when you start thinking of like an entire first episode for a very fantasy driven kind of period piece, like it's going to be very expensive. Like if you're going to try to do it justice, you know what I mean? Like it's going to be expensive. So the price tag on that's not really that jarring to me. It's just, I guess, going to be interesting to see how they utilize that and how much of that actually ends up on screen as you're watching it. But
I don't know, man. Like, I gotta imagine that first season at the most is going to be 10 episodes. If it ends up being more, I'm going to be surprised. But if you break that down, that's $45 million an episode. That's a lot of money, man. I remember there was a time when like people were talking about what was it? Fastlane, and of course this is late 90s, early 2000s, right? This show about 2 cops that are very not fancy, but dressed real outrageous, or however you want it. It was Bill Bellamy and I can't. Paul? Is it Paul? No. What is that guy's name? He was in Can Hardly Wait, and he was the father in the Twilight movies, like the vampire father. Peter Facinelli. Oh,
yeah.
So and Tiffany Amber Thiessen was also in the show, and like they were cops, undercover cops all the time, and at the time I think that was like a $1 million episode show, and that it got canceled after the first season because like you're just spending way too much money. I mean, I know we're 20 years later and inflation and whatever, and TV is a big business now, but like $45 million an episode, it's got to have all the CG. It's got to have huge battle scenes, because that $10 million episode or scene that you're talking about, I believe, is the Battle of the Bastards episode of Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean that was a huge scene. If you're spending quadruple that an episode in this show, it's gotta look amazing.
I mean, again, I think that would be the hope, and again, I'm not really shocked by this. To me, this just is another showcase of how important exclusivity and how important having that content on their platforms is. to keeping their platforms continually moving forward in a viable way, right? Because, House of Cards, it's not even that old in comparison to Fastlane, which you were just talking about, right? And House of Cards, I believe, was around $10 million an episode. So
really,
yeah. So from what I understand, I could be mistaken on that, but from what I recall, I remember, for some reason, I distinctly remember reading about that and being like, "Wow, that seems like such a grotesque number for a single episode." But
especially
then you're like,
with
well,
that's CGI. It's all that has to have been like everybody's salary.
Well, I mean, I'm sure it's salary, but there's also a lot of logistics and other things that have to go into it. But I mean, when you think about it that way and you're like, okay, well, if House of Cards doesn't really have a lot of this stuff and it's about 10 million per episode, it becomes pretty easy to see why $45 million an episode for 10 episodes isn't really that outrageous when you have all of these actors, all of these crazy location, props, wardrobes, CGI. Like, that money is going to dry up very quickly. And so that's what I mean. Like, for me, at least, I just really don't find that shocking anymore.
You know what? Good. I'm glad you don't, but I do.
Now, I guess the caveat to that is if it comes out and it just looks like garbage and doesn't do well, then yeah, it's going to be like, where did that money go? But for right now, I'm going to be reserved and say I'm not the least bit shocked by that at this point.
But if you also paid $250 million just for the rights, and you're paying $456 million for the first season, you're really banking on people are going to enjoy this, so that you have multiple seasons of the show, right? Like, otherwise, that's got to be a huge loss.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that would be anyone's mindset and attempt. Whether or not it's going to translate to that or not, we'll see. Was it Disney spent $250 million on John Carter, I believe, and it was a complete, crap show in terms of the return. So, I'm not saying that the movie is good or bad. I'm just saying in terms of their investment,
right?
That did not pan out the way that they wanted to. So it can happen. But yes, I believe that the mindset and the hope would be, yes, we're investing a huge chunk of money into this. And again, investing in acquiring the rights for Lord of the Rings. You think about, how many books there are, how long those books are. I mean, yeah, you could potentially set this up, and especially if you're doing 10 episodes at an hour apiece, that's only 10 hours of content. So, realistically, I mean, you could very easily get 5, 6 or more seasons out of that. And that's, before even looking at something like what you were talking about with like The Hobbit and things like that. And so, I think the $250 million upfront investment of acquiring the rights, again, is not as surprising to me because, like you said, like Lord of the Rings has become massively iconic, and it's obviously has a staying power that it's been so relevant since it's been written. So, that again to me isn't too shocking. But I agree. I think if you are investing that much just to get the rights, you're going to have to. I would hope at least you would have to have a pretty solid plan of what you were going to do with that and how you were going to get some sort of return of investment on that. Because you're right, that is a pretty large sum of money to just jump into something that, could fail.
Yeah. I mean, I get what you're saying, and I totally understand that it not being a shocking number anymore. It's just, and I guess you kind of brought me around to that, like it not being that shocking. It's just, wow. Just, it seems like a lot of money. It's
well, think about it this way though, too, right? I mean, Disney, and I think it was Endgame, they spent $500 million for 2 hours of entertainment.
Well, Endgame is not 2 hours. It's 3 hours.
Okay, but either way, you know what I mean? They spent $1 billion on 2 films. So, I mean, realistically, if you're spending half that amount, on 10 episodes, like, I don't think that's that unreasonable.
That's fair. I get that, but I guess it's the return effect. The amount of money they're getting off of it seems not more reasonable, but like more prevalent, seeing as how, a movie ticket is going to be what, $10 to $20, right? So every person that went and saw it has to pay for that. Whereas, and then they eventually get home box office and rentals and sales and all that stuff. Whereas this is being an Amazon thing, like the measurement of it is how many people decide to get a membership to Prime Video, and then also how it affects people staying on Prime Video that are already on there, right? Like, because advertisement doesn't really play into this. Like, you're not going to get anybody drinking a Pepsi can in the middle of Lord of the Rings.
Well, no, I mean, that's definitely true. But I mean, I think the other kind of major difference is, when you have a company whose bread and butter is not media production, that certainly opens the door for them to be able to take extreme risks and not really care whether it pays off or not, right? So if you had a company that was just a standalone production company, yeah, they need that to go and be successful and all that, right? So that's one thing. I think the other thing too is, I mean, when you stop and think about the traditional distribution platform, somebody might go watch a movie once, so there's one sales ticket, that person may or may not buy it, all that sort of stuff. But when you have something like these streaming services, everyone is paying for that content, whether they use it or not. So it's kind of like the same principle as like a lot of gym memberships. There's tons of people that have gym memberships that never show up, never go to the gym, and that gym is just draining the well of money from these people. And really, when you stop and think about like all the streaming platforms, they're kind of in the same boat, because whether you watch it or not, you're still paying for that movie. Like, they're still drawing continuous generated revenue every single month from all of these people. So they also don't need it to perform in the same way that they might have needed it to perform 20 years ago, right? Yeah. So I think that has a pretty significant amount to do with it as well, because you're right, it becomes so much harder to quantify the actual success of something, because yes, you might see a spike or an increase of new memberships around that content, but how are you measuring retention from that content? How are you, measuring all that sort of stuff, right? Because is it one of those things where it's like, oh, well, this person watched part of it, but they never got rid of their membership, but their membership came in at this time, but then you have this other person that's had a membership for like 5 years, but then they've watched a show like 10 times. So, again, I think it just becomes a totally different numbers game as to, and I'm sure they have access to incredible analytic data and what people are doing on their platforms. So, I mean, I'm not too shocked by that. The other thing that I've heard, which I think this is kind of interesting, is that there are like companies that are now like watching you watch their movies via like cameras. So like stuff on like your smartphones, like smart TVs that have cameras and things like that. Like, they're actually watching like facial expressions and things like that. And now I guess they're getting into a pretty good arena of being able to calculate your emotional responses to characters and to the shows. And so we're, I think, walking down a pathway of eventually studios knowing what someone wants based on how they're watching it, and maybe just killing the main character off and going with a background character, because every time that character comes on screen, everyone comes like more interested in the show, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, big data and analytical data is going to, I think, start playing a larger and larger and larger role in how a lot of these shows are, quantified as returns of investment and things like that as well. Okay. All right. That's it for the news. Let's get into talking about Minari. This is an Oscar-nominated film for the year 2020, directed by Lee Isaac Chung, also written by Lee Isaac Chung, starring Steven Yuen. I think most people know him as Glenn from The Walking Dead. I had a hard time separating him from that character watching this movie. And now he's also the voice of Mark Grayson, Invincible. Yeah, if you're watching that on Prime Video. What was that? Can we talk about that real quick?
Sure.
just because I think you mentioned it on a couple of episodes back, like I think 1 or 2 episodes back, and I think specifically you told me that I should watch it. And I think you said if you like really good voice cast, and everyone should watch it. Which I started the first. I think I'm on the 3rd episode, and I'm trying to go slow with it because I actually don't want to just like binge through it. So I won't give anything away, but I think you're absolutely right. I think everyone should go watch a show. But what I want to say is this. So I started watching the first episode, and it's like going along, and I'm like, okay, like, yeah, okay, like normal what you would expect comic book hero stuff, right? So you're like, you're kind of going along with it. And I was like, all right, well, if this is all the show is, I don't know. I'm probably not going to watch it right now. I would say the last like 3 minutes, maybe minute and a half of the first episode, I was like, okay, now I'm in. Now you have my attention. At first you had my interest, but now you have my attention because wow. That's all I'm going to say. I'm going to leave it on that cliffhanger. And I agree with you. I think everyone should go check it out because it's certainly 180'd on me very quickly. And I was like, okay.
Well, I just want you to know that you can't really binge the show because Amazon Prime releases it 1 episode at a time or 1 episode a week.
Oh.
And yes, that's essentially what I tell everybody is that you have to make it through the first episode all the way to the very end. Because after you get to the mid-credit scene, I guess that's what you want to call it, you'll know if whether or not this is a show for you or not a show for you. And yeah, that's
well,
yeah.
Even that, I almost turned it off immediately, and then like when I hit the button, it still showed a pretty good gap of like stuff left in the first episode, and I was like, wait, so is that not over? And so I hit play, and then that stuff happened, like, and I was like, oh my god, I was like, I almost missed that, like, so yes, do stay and make sure you're watching the entirety of the first episode because it does seem to kind of randomly just end out of nowhere, so something to be aware of.
I can't wait to hear what you have to say when you get to the more episodes. So, however, in this movie, Will Patton is also probably the only other recognizable for American audiences actor in this film, which I love Will Patton just about everything I watch him in. Obviously, the first thing I remember him from is Armageddon. But, you know, he goes on to make other great movies like We Are the Titans, or Remember the Titans, sorry. And I'm going to say Punisher. Like, I like Punisher.
Nice.
But he's got other great films under his belt, obviously. So what did you think of this cast?
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly agree with you. I didn't, I guess, have the same problem with Steven Yuen as you did. Like, for some reason, it was kind of very, it was very easy for me to let go of the Glenn thing for some reason. I really like him as Glenn, though, and I really enjoyed his character run on The Walking Dead. So I enjoyed watching him in this, and I thought his performance was wonderful. I thought he did a great job in this. Will Patton is also someone who I did not know he was in this movie, and when he showed up, I was like, oh, I love that guy. It's great. Like, so glad he's in this. And his character as well is a very, very interesting character. And so, yeah, I have to say though, the actor who played the little boy, David, I guess his name is Alan S. Kim. To me, he kind of stole the show. Like his performance, like, I don't know. I was just cracking up at that little kid. I thought he did such a great job. But yeah, so I guess I would kind of be that for the cast. I mean, we'll get a little bit more into the cast and story in a second, or the story, I guess, in a second, because I had some issues with that. But
yeah, I would definitely agree with you that David, the character of David, steals the movie. I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily say that his performance is great, but he is, and he's a kid. Like, I can't fault him for that. You don't have great kid actors really, especially as young as him. But he does do a pretty good job. Like, he hits his lines, his marks, you know, everything plays out well. What would you say this movie is about?
I mean, I would say it's just kind of, you know, the struggle of trying to achieve a better life. I guess you could say the American dream, but I don't think having a better life is the American dream. I think that's everyone's dream. Like, I don't think there's anyone that's like, oh, I want to have a worse life tomorrow. So like, I don't think that's uniquely an American thing. So like, I personally have kind of a hard time, I guess, saying that. But
no,
yeah,
but
to me, yeah, go ahead.
Specifically, I think what you're trying to sell as the American dream is something that we've always been told is like, you make the money that you need to make, and then you go off and you make a life for yourself with that money. So, like, the character Steven Yuen plays of Jacob. Sorry, thank you. Jacob and his wife, they were doing well enough in California, in a chicken hatchery, and Jacob even became one of the fastest gender revealers of chickens, I guess. I don't. The idea is that
I think they were inseminating them. They were, because he kept referring to it as chicken sexting. So I think they were actually forcing them to do that.
No, they weren't.
Or were they just gendering them? Oh yeah, I guess you're right, because no, you are right, because they were taking the female ones and they were sending them to egg farms.
Yep.
And then the male ones they were throwing in furnaces. So yeah, you absolutely are correct. Yeah.
Wait, I missed the whole furnace thing. They're throwing the male ones in the furnace?
Yeah, so when he goes outside to have that conversation with his son David, when they first get to the chicken sexting place, and that's such a weird phrase to say, in Arkansas, David goes up to the mom and is like, what am I supposed to do? And he's like, oh, I can take a break. And so he goes outside and he's sitting there smoking a cigarette, and his son goes, what's that? And it's like the smoke coming out of the chimney. And he's like, oh, like that's the furnace. We throw the male chickens there because they're useless. And that's why you and I have to work hard and be useful. So he's like basically implying that like if you don't produce money and take care of your family, that like you're going to be thrown in a furnace because you're useless.
So we also have to say, as a little bit of tangent here, is that this movie is not fully in subtitle, but the main characters speak Korean most of the time because they are Korean. And I am a bad millennial American, however you want to say it. Whereas I personally don't care I don't care about subtitles. Like I like watching movies with subtitles. It doesn't affect me in any way. However, I have now become trained to not keep my eyes on the TV screen. Like I might get distracted by my phone or whatever else is going on. So I will miss certain pieces of dialogue if it's in subtitled like this movie is. So I must have looked away at that moment when they were talking about that, which I am greatly offended by. I'm sorry to anybody that's listening to this. So thank you for that extra part. But yes, you're
offended that you missed it, or you're offended that they were burning baby chickens. I'm
offended that I missed it. Like I'm offended that I disrespected watching the movie in such a way. But yes, they are separating the males and the females so that the females can go off and be bred. I guess I just never thought of that being a human job to have to do, of searching for chicken genitalia and then separating them. But I guess it has to get done. And so they were he was fast and he made money. So he moved his family out to Arkansas so that they could buy a huge 50 acres of land so that he can then farm Korean vegetables, and then in his hope sell these Korean vegetables to Korean markets nearby in bigger cities, and so that they wouldn't have to get them all shipped from California, and the vegetables would be more fruitful. Like, it's a good idea in theory. Like if these markets will pay for the fresher vegetables, then he would be cornering that market. But come to find out, it's not easy just to start up a farm.
No, but he did it. I mean, he was successful. Like, I mean, that's, I don't know. This is where a lot of my issues, I guess, with the story and the movie kind of come about, is because there's really not a lot of drama. Like, I guess, and that was on me. That was my expectation, is like, I was really expecting this to be a very like heavily dramatic piece. And there really isn't a lot of drama until I would say maybe the last first like 15, 20 minutes, there's a spike of it. And then it kind of is resolved relatively quickly in some capacities, I guess. So I guess I kind of had an issue with that. And then the Monica, who is Jacob's wife, I just really didn't understand her at all. Like, she just, I don't know. It just seemed like she was so against everything and just so broken up over everything and just hated everything. And I was like, what is your problem? Like, you know, it sounds like she didn't really want to leave Korea, but then they had the whole conversation about how they were going to leave Korea and save each other. But then sounded like she hated California, but then they moved to Arkansas, and then all of a sudden she loved California but hated Arkansas. And so, like, I don't know, I really could not empathize with her character at all, because I was like, what in the hell is your problem? Like, you've got way more land than you could have ever gotten in California. You're living in what has to be a better situation, because, again, you know, she also alludes to the fact that, yes, they were making money in California, but they were not making enough. So it's not like their situation got worse. Like, it had to have gotten significantly better when they moved to Arkansas. I mean, I'm guessing. You don't really ever see that, so I can't make a true direct comparison. But based on the conversations, I was just like, what is your problem? So
what I think is, and this is my interpretation of it from a few lines of dialogue that we saw, or that we saw and we heard. Jacob at one point says, you city people always, you know, you're so bougie. He says something to the fact that you don't know.
You think you're better than us.
So I think back in Korea, even though the two of them left Korea together, they were a young couple and they moved to the States to make a better life for themselves, if that's the way you want to put it. I think she was from the city in Korea and he was from the country. And like, so he has this knowledge of how to farm. But they have two different worldviews. So then when he moves her out to Arkansas in the middle of the country, she is so now separated. Obviously in California, she was separated from her homeland of Korea and not understanding stuff. But now she's separated from a community of other Koreans. Whereas here in this small town in Arkansas, there's, I think the other lady says there's about 12 of them, maybe total. And they don't want to start up a church because they moved away from bigger cities because of the Korean churches that were there. Like, they don't want to do that. So she doesn't have a community to relate to. And she is maybe more used to the luxuries that a bigger city would offer that Arkansas doesn't. They are super far away from everything. They are, you know, it's she has to work as well. And it's hard for her. She obviously gets happier once her mom comes to live with them, but that then offers up a whole new thing.
Marginal, though. Even like when her mom comes, it's so marginal, and like even it's just like she was just doom and gloom the whole time. Because even with like the kid's heart murmur, like it's getting better, but she only thought it was getting worse. And to me, it was like that was like the biggest encapsulating characterization for her, is that she just constantly thinks that everything is getting worse when in actuality everything is getting better for them. And like, I don't know, just some of the comments that she would make to him, I'm like, how can you even say that to him? Like, this, you can tell very clearly that he is passionately trying to provide for all of you, and you're just constantly like, oh, you don't care about this family and blah blah. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, what is your problem? So like, I don't know, I had a real issue with that, like just getting empathized with her character. I couldn't do it.
See, and I think that's funny, is that I feel that's where all the drama for this movie was just in their relationship with each other. Like, obviously they were in love with each other for the longest time, but maybe they based their relationship off the wrong thing, and it didn't last, so to speak. And she calls him selfish for wanting to have a legacy and provide in this way as opposed to providing in a different way. They as they've stated, that they weren't making enough to live in California, but maybe if they lived in Arkansas, but like closer to the hatchery in a regular home instead of on a whole bunch of acres. And then, you know, this also takes place in the 80s, and Asian culture is usually very subservient to the male patriarchy of the family and stuff like that. I think there's a lot of things playing here with the immigrant story, the male versus female, the drama of what happens when you fall out of love with the person that you've started a family with, like, and then it all encapsulates at the end with the farm catching on fire.
Like even that, and that's what I mean. Like, there's like little sprinkles of drama, but there's no, in my opinion, there's no real strong drama, because even that, right? Like, they don't lose the whole farm. The crops don't burn. Their house doesn't burn. It's one tiny little shed that happened to have that recent harvest in it, but nothing else is gone.
But that recent harvest is what was going to set them up for the next season. Like, what they grew this season has to last for next season.
Right, but that's still not a make or break you thing. That's at least not the way that it's presented. It's a setback, sure, but that's not like a catastrophe. And that's my thing with all of this. Like, there's not really any, like, it's like a flat line of drama. There's no like actual like ebb and flow or like roller coaster ride that you go on with this. It's all just very tonal, and it's all, like, for me at least, it was very tonally the same. And I was just expecting something bigger to happen, and like something so much worse to happen to these characters, and it never does. Like, it never does. Like, he's like, oh, well, there's not water. But then I'm like, okay, there's this whole fucking creek full of water that you know about, that you've been told about, and you're never like, well, we can get water from there. You know what I mean? And there's this other like thing where it's like, okay, well, I'm going to just start jacking water from the city. And so he does it. And then it's like the water gets shut off, but the water's not really shut off. He's just redirected it. And then he doesn't redirect it to the house until the grandma has a stroke. So it's like, none of these things are inherently like taken away from them. It's just bad decision making. And so to me, it's like, they're just very like passive protagonists. Like, they're just kind of flowing down this lazy river. Like, they're not really going on this like this dramatic journey through this story, in my opinion. And I think that's on me, because like that's, I guess, what I was expecting, and it just isn't there. For me, at least. That's
fair. No, that's exactly how you experience the movie. So yeah, with all this stuff that's going on between Jacob and Monica, you kind of have this secondary battle that's going on between David and the grandma. I don't know if they actually ever give her a name or not.
I think they just called her grandma. I don't ever remember her.
Yeah. Well, according to IMDb, her name was Sunja.
Okay.
But yeah, you definitely hear them call her grandma more than anything else. So David, the youngest, has to give up part of his room for grandma, who comes to live with them. She sleeps on the floor. He sleeps on the bed. It's kind of traditional in the Korean culture, as so they say. But like, he's never met her before, so he doesn't quite get around to liking her, but just through sheer playing with him and being around him, because that's why they brought her, so that she could watch them while the two of them, Monica and Jacob, are at work. There is a son and a daughter. Unfortunately, the daughter doesn't get a lot of screen time or characterization. Thank you. Character building.
Hardly at all.
Yeah, hardly at all. But at one point, David pees into a cup and gives that to his grandma, and she drinks it. And like, he gets punished by his parents, especially by Jacob. He's supposed to get hit with a switch, but he doesn't. The first switch breaks, and the second one is too thin, and grandma lets him go, like, with a, you're a smart boy kind of thing. But their relationship,
the second one was like a piece of wheat. It wasn't even a switch. It was so funny.
But their relationship gets better. Like, she even like rocks him to sleep one night, and unfortunately, that night she ends up having a stroke in the middle of the night, and she doesn't die, but she is now, handicapped from this stroke, as many people become after such a event. So she is not as helpful around the house anymore, but she still wants to be. And as she's helping clean or helping, put things away, she eventually helps to burn the trash. I guess there's no, I don't know how it works out in the country. I don't know, how it works in Arkansas, but apparently instead of having someone pick up the trash or them dumping it somewhere, they burn their trash, and they happen to burn their trash a little too close to their shed where they are keeping their produce, as Richard pointed out. And she knocks over a piece of trash that's on fire, which then catches the grass on fire, which then catches the shed on fire. She is so distraught by this and the fact that she is no longer able to really contribute to the family that she kind of starts to walk off, and it's almost like she just wants to go die in the woods somewhere. But both the daughter and the son, David and her name, I don't even know what her name is, Anne. David and Anne follow her in the rain, and it was raining, right?
I don't think so.
No, it was just okay.
I think it was just night. Just late.
Follow her and call out her name until the point where David stops her and makes sure that she doesn't go off and stays with the family. And I just have to say that I was ugly crying when it came to this part of the movie. I was devastated by just what was happening in this scene. It was very strange, and I enjoyed it. I almost thought that that's where the movie was going to end, because right before that you have Jacob and Monica having this discussion that Monica was going to take the kids and go back to California, and he was going to have to stay here, and they were going to break up. Like, their family was going to split up. But afterwards, you see, was it David and Jacob go out to the Minari field where the grandma had planted the weed out by the creek, and he explained that grandma did a good thing by planting it out here, and then you see that the whole family is there when they bring the water diviner guy back to find a place to make a new well so that the crops can grow. I honestly do not know anything about farming life in that way, and how difficult I guess it can be to find water.
Yep. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I
guess that scene implies that the family is staying together after this almost tragedy or semi tragedy, however you want to look at it.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I don't know. It was crazy because, I don't know. It's really hard because I feel like, the obviously Jacob runs into the shed as it's burning with the produce, and he starts trying to get the produce out, and then of course the wife runs in there, Monica, she runs in there and she's trying to help him, and then she kind of starts breathing in too much smoke and is kind of collapsed on the ground a little bit, and so he grabs her and pulls her out, and then it's kind of this moment where, I don't know, it felt like she finally maybe realized that she was being completely unreasonable with things, because she kept saying, case in point, they go to the doctor for their son to check up on the heart, but they were also he was also taking produce with him to try to sell to this Korean market that's there. And when they park, he's bringing the box inside, and she's like, why are you bringing that inside? Where the hell are you going to put, well, she didn't say hell, but she's like, where are you going to put that? And he's like, well, I need to take it inside. It's too hot to leave it in the car. And then she's like, well, you're putting those stupid plants before your son. And I'm like, those plants are going to provide money for you to live. What are you talking? That's going to provide money to pay for the doctor. What are you talking about? And so then he parks and he has to bring it in anyway. And she's so mad at him for trying to make money to provide for the family. And I'm just I think you're looking at this totally wrong, lady. And so I feel that moment was this moment of a shift in her character. You know what I mean? She blames herself for her mother's stroke. And then I think maybe in that moment, she kind of does realize, wait a minute, he's willing to go into a burning building and risk dying to pull these plants out or these produce, this produce out to provide for us. How how much more could he sacrifice before she realized that he actually is doing all of this for them, And so I did think that, that was important. And I think there's a lot of great moments in this film. Like you said, the one with like the David and the grandma. I think there's a lot of really good moments between them. And just overall, like it has some moments that are like really heartwarming and really, kind of a cute movie, but I don't know. It just wasn't enough in my opinion.
And then we haven't talked about it much more than what you said earlier, but Will Patton's character, who we were first introduced to him as he's dropping off the tractor that Jacob's going to use to farm. But he's like, hey, I just dropped this tractor off. It's not my normal job. If you have work for me, I would love to do it. And he is also a veteran of the Korean War, so he knows about Korean culture and he likes being around Korean people apparently. So Jacob essentially hires him on as a farmhand, and he is very eccentric, like even to the point where the kids that go to school with David like make fun of him from the bus, and it's kind of sad, but you understand what they're trying to get across with this character. What did you think of the writing and the directing? So Lee Isaac Chung, looking up his IMDb. I don't recognize any of the other titles, so I have nothing else to go off of. But what did you feel?
Well, yeah. First, I just want to say that I really liked Paul's character. You know what I mean? To me, it felt kind of like he was really constantly trying to atone for whatever he had to do in the war, and that probably led him to the path that he was at. Like he doesn't go to church anymore. He like literally spends all Sunday just dragging around an actual crucifix, like a full-sized one,
right.
Which is obviously not an easy thing to do. So he definitely feels like he has some penance to pay. And their dynamic together, I thought, was really nice as well. Again, I think from a writing and directing standpoint, for me, I think you commented on it. There is all these little elements of things that I think are being attempted to communicate or being attempted to utilize to create drama. It just, none of it was enough for me from what I was expecting. And I guess I just want to say it's not that I'm saying this movie is bad. I still think this is a good movie. It's just not anywhere near the dramatic strength that I was anticipating. And some of that is probably on me because listening to people talk about it and things like that, I had this kind of preconceived idea that this was going to be a super heavy dramatic film. And to me, it just wasn't. And I think it could have been. I think it has a lot of potential to be that. I just don't think it ever pushes enough in one way or the other to make that happen. The directing obviously worked out pretty well because Steven Yuen is nominated for an Oscar or Academy Award for acting. And I believe this is actually the second time that Lee Isaac Chung has directed an actor or actress, however you want to say it, to an Academy Award nomination. So I don't want to take anything away from that. You know what I mean? I definitely think the performances were good and I enjoyed them. There was just more story things that I just didn't resonate with me in the way that I guess maybe the attempt was there to do, or maybe that is a cultural thing on my end. Maybe it would be more impactful if, I knew more about Korean culture or something like that. But I mean, I grew up in the Midwest, so I have a little bit of that kind of connection to it. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. That's kind of how I feel about it, I guess. Maybe that's not the best articulation of it, but I was just expecting more. But I don't think it's a bad movie. What about you?
I think you expressed it well. I think you did a good job. Like I said, I enjoyed this movie a lot. It was a lot more. I got a lot more from it than I expected I was going to. I really fell in love with these characters and the little bit of drama, I guess, that was between the two, or between the family and the situation and stuff like that. I enjoyed watching this film. One of the things I wanted to shout out, I guess, is in this the trivia section of this says that the whole film was shot in 25 days. All the scenes involving the creek were filmed in a single day. And I think that's 4 scenes or 3 scenes,
give or take. Yeah, probably 3 or 4.
So that was kind of cool. That's kind of cool to think about. What did you think of the filming? Let's see who the cinematographer on this was.
I mean, again, I think it's a beautifully shot movie, right? I think the production design and stuff is done really well too, and I think that the cinematography and the production design complement each other pretty well, because again, you do have that very kind of rural type of vibe to it. I mean, it does feel very kind of isolated, Midwesterny, and the locations are just incredible. Though there's even a couple of shots where Jacob and Paul were out by kind of like that shed moving the produce, and there was like a visible storm coming in the background, and they managed to get a couple of shots of like the lightning and stuff that I thought was really nice. And the lighting as well. There's like a whole scene kind of toward the beginning where it's raining, and Jacob comes in and he's talking about the tornado and stuff, and the lights in the house go out, and we're just getting this kind of blue washed moonlight that's coming in, and it was just a really nice effect. So I mean, yeah, I think visually, I think it's a very beautiful film. I think it's captured very, very well, and it does kind of almost give it this weird ethereal type vibe as you're watching a lot of it. There's a shot where the camera was like mounted to the tractor that Jacob was driving, and it's just kind of him floating through this farm. And so, yeah, I really do think it's a beautiful movie visually. And I think the acting is great too. I don't know. I just feel like I said a bunch of stuff, and I really don't want people to be like, oh, I'm not going to watch it now, or it's a terrible movie. And it's like, no. Like, you should still watch it. It's a good movie. I was expecting something different.
So the cinematographer is Lachlan Milne. I believe that's how you say his last name. He's done a lot of shorts, but notably he has been the director of photography for several episodes of Stranger Things on Netflix. And
cool.
And because of this movie, he has been nominated for the Austin Film Critics Association, Broadcast Film Critics Association, Columbus Film Critics Association, Gold Derby Award, Houston Film Critics Society Awards for Minari, best cinematographer, as well as New Zealand. Oh, New Zealand, he was the winner for Hunt for the Wilder People. Was he?
Oh, that's a fantastic movie too. I could totally see kind of the parallels between that too. Have you seen that?
I have not seen that.
Oh, you should check it out. It's that's a good little movie too.
Okay. So yeah, anything else you wanted to say about this movie? Like, I hope people don't not watch this movie, because I think you've pointed out that you do think it is a worthwhile watch, and I am excited to see what other people have to say about this movie. And whether or not it wins.
I mean, that's what I was going to say. Like, I think at this point, I'm incredibly curious to see. I mean, obviously, we still have Judah and the Black Messiah and the Father. I think that's the last two that we kind of have left. So we talked a little bit. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so we'll have to do those two next week in one episode. So
right, we'll have to do a double feature,
so to speak. You're right. Yeah.
But so I think you refresh my memory a little bit. What did you picked Promising Young Woman? You thought
Correct.
That was kind of your front runner, yeah? Mm-hmm. Did this change your mind at all? Like, do you see this edging that out now?
I don't see it edging it out. Did I enjoy this movie more than I liked Promising Young Woman? Yes, but I still think Promising Young Woman's the better film.
Okay, yeah, that was it. I was just curious to see if there was any updates on that after watching this, so I guess we'll have to report back in on the double feature if either one of those changed our minds either.
True. If you have an opinion on this movie or anything else we talked about, please find me on Twitter. I am at Mitchipedia GEM. GEM stands for Geek Elite Media. Richard, where can people find you online?
So yeah, the easiest way to find me is just head on over to ricown.com, ricown.com, and it should have linked to pretty much most of my socials on there that I'm not really, I don't know. I'm in a weird spot right now. I haven't had much time to be on any of the social media stuff. So, but do, swing by and drop a follow, because obviously once my time schedule stuff frees back up, I'll be back on there and be a little bit more active. So definitely interact with me on there. Tell me how wrong I am about Minari.
I don't think you're wrong. I think you've expressed quite well how you feel about the movie, and I don't see how that can be wrong. The rest of Geek Elite Media is at Geek Elite Media on Twitter, at Geek Elite Media on Instagram, and Facebook.com/Geek Elite Media is our Facebook page. Check out archived episodes of this podcast and other podcasts on our website, geekelitemedia.com. Whatever podcatcher you use to listen to us, please rate and review us, because it helps spread the word of our network. But until next time, this is the Mitch and Rich Show on the Geek Elite Media Network, saying always remember to geek out.
Geek out.
This concludes our broadcast.